Earlier in the week, Russian President Vladimir Putin said that he wants a litany of issues addressed first before any truce. You fired them, now hire them. Two federal judges have ordered the Trump administration to reinstate thousands of probationary workers axed in recent mass layoffs. The Trump administration is appealing the injunction.
For Donald Trump, a shutdown would be a gift. It would be the best distraction he could ask for from his awful agenda.
A U-turn from a top Democrat in a bid to avert a government shutdown. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer is said to have lined up enough Democratic Senate votes in favor of funding through September. Schumer says a no vote on the Republican funding bill would only empower Trump to dismantle more federal programs. It's time for Trump has approached the U.S. Supreme Court to limit the scope of lower court orders which blocked his move on birthright citizenship. Trump wants to stop children of undocumented immigrants and foreign workers from getting automatic citizenship at birth. Millions of Indian parents working in the United States would be affected. And the south lawn of the White House turned into a car showroom this week. Trump promoted Tesla cars on display at the White House in a bid to boost the financial fortunes of loyalist Elon Musk. Democrats want the event investigated for violating federal ethics laws, is what they say. Now, a 30-day ceasefire in Ukraine has Kyiv agreeing to the U.S. proposed deal. Russia says yes, but later Russian President Putin met with U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff in Moscow late Thursday. U.S. President Trump called those talks very good and productive. Earlier in the week, Russian President Putin had said before the guns go silent, he wants the root cause of the conflict addressed.
Мы согласны с предложениями прекратить боевые действия, но исходим из того, что это прекращение должно быть таким, которое привело бы к долгосрочному миру и устранило бы первоначальные причины этого кризиса.
No, he put out a very promising statement, but it wasn't complete. And yeah, I'd love to meet with him or talk to him, but we have to get it over with fast. You know, every day people are being killed.
Ми всі почули з Росії дуже передбачувані, дуже маніпулятивні слова Путіна у відповідь на ідею тиші на фронті. Він фактично готує відмову станом на зараз. Путін, звісно, боїться сказати прямо президенту Трампу, що хоче продовжувати цю війну. Хоче вбивати українців.
Joined by Washington correspondent Nick Harper. Nick, Putin wants a list of preconditions addressed. Many would be totally unacceptable to Ukraine. Tell us what Putin wants.
Yeah, Allister, a real balancing act for the United States at the moment at this very delicate time, trying not to antagonize either side, but there's certainly a long list of demands coming from Moscow. As we heard there, President Putin wants to try and address what he calls the root causes of this conflict. Now, if we think back 3 years when Russia invaded Ukraine, at that time, he was saying the root causes were all about trying to demilitarize and denazify Ukraine. So it might be a case that he's not rushing towards a ceasefire because it's unclear whether he feels that he has managed to achieve those during this 3-year conflict. He's also suggesting that he wants to get a single big deal done. Up until now, Ukraine have said that they're looking for a 30-day pause in the fighting while negotiations continue. However, Vladimir Putin suggesting he'd rather get one big deal done because he's worried that Ukraine might use those 30 days to mobilize, rearm and train people. Moscow also ruling out giving back any territory and questioning what happens in the Kursk region, a region that Ukraine invaded last year. We have seen Russia win back much of their territory in the interim period, but there's still a question of what happens to the Romanian Russian territory that's still being held from Ukraine. They're also asking who would police any particular ceasefire and what happens once a deal has been done. And there are several things on the Ukrainian side that they are also worried about. The fact that during the course of this week, the US has restarted intelligence sharing and restarted arming Ukraine. Russia seems to think that that is a red line and would be looking for the United States not just to end that, but potentially also end many of the sanctions that are in place against Russia as part of any longer-term agreement.
Right, Nick Harper there joining us from Washington with those details. And we can also tell you at this point in time that the White House press secretary is saying that Trump has no plans to talk to Vladimir Putin today, although he's putting pressure on Putin and the Russians to do the right thing. We'd be keeping tabs on that story. Moving on to other news now. This week marked 50 days of President Trump's return to the White House. Trump's rapid-fire moves have many furious and others ecstatic. Here's a quick recap of his key decisions. Trump's unstoppable tariff threats have triggered a global trade war, 25% tariffs on steel and aluminium imports. Goods coming into the US from Canada, Mexico and China taxed. Starting April 2nd, Trump has promised reciprocal tariffs on the EU, India and others. Similar to his first term, Trump is cracking down on immigration, deporting undocumented immigrants, including over 300 Indians from the US. In another move, efforts to stop US citizenship for children of undocumented immigrants and even those on temporary work permits. Meanwhile, this week saw the Trump administration gutting the Education Department. Several key federal agencies, including USAID, have already faced the axe. Hundreds of thousands of federal workers have been fired. Trump's foreign policy moves include talk of turning Gaza into a Riviera of the Middle East. Then there have been efforts to repeatedly back Russia and Putin as peacemakers, and that has strained ties with the Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky. And amongst his near 90 executive orders, a notable one is Trump's proposed gold card. He plans to fix the US debt crisis by allowing people to buy US citizenship for $5 million. And a poll now saying that Trump's approval ratings are sliding. All right, let's get you a developing story at this point in time, trying to get across to some live pictures. We're talking about the incoming Canadian Prime Minister. Now, Mark Carney, he's been the governor of the banks of Canada and England. That's experience there that's expected to come in quite handy as he tackles a trade battle with US President Donald Trump. Carney replaces outgoing Prime Minister Justin Trudeau after a landslide victory in last week's Liberal leadership race. He's expected to be sworn in any time now. Some of those live pictures on your screen. Joining us from Vancouver is NDTV's Maha Siddiqui. Maha, Carney's got a tough job ahead of him, one of the toughest perhaps for any Canadian Prime Minister in decades.
That's absolutely right. And that is why he's being called the man for the moment, not the man of the moment. Because many people believe, and especially the Liberal Party, that he is the person who is best placed to deal with Donald Trump and the tariff threat that is coming from across the border. This is because he is a banker. He has been the governor for the Bank of England, for the Bank of Canada, and he has been applauded for his work during his tenure as the governor of the Bank of Canada, considering that even during a tough period, he was able to keep inflation predictable and low. And therefore, a lot of hope rests on him now that he will be able to take Canada out of this crisis situation that it is facing with regards to the tariff threat that is coming in from the US. Now, Canada has already announced a retaliatory tariff in response to the aluminum and steel tariffs that have come from the US. Also, for the first tranche of $30 billion worth of goods, retaliatory tariffs on that have also been announced. So at the moment, it appears that this is the kind of momentum that Mark Carney is expected to keep on the other side, that is Donald Trump, because the threat is not just economic coercion, but the bigger threat that Canada is now facing is the threat of annexation. And the belief is here that this economic threat or coercion that is being used by Trump is to weaken Canada to the extent that an annexation can take place. The 51st state of the United States is a threat that is being taken extremely seriously here in Canada. And therefore, the challenge for Mark Carney is twofold, not just to create some sort of confidence
Indeed.
here among the Canadians that they will be safe from inflation because of the tariff threat, but also the fact that the territory will also be safe.
Thanks very much indeed, Maha Siddiqui, joining us there from Vancouver. Now, this week has seen the most significant pushback in the Trump administration's attempt to slash the government workforce, which consists of more than 2 million people. Two federal judges ordered the Trump's administration to rehire tens of thousands of probationary workers, part of mass firings that we saw last month. Now, probationary workers are either recent hires or those who had taken new positions. The question now, will the Trump administration actually comply with this order? It has already filed an appeal against the injunction. For more, we're now joined by Richard Painter, law professor at the University of Minnesota. Richard is also former chief White House ethics lawyer for President George W. Bush. Also joining us, Andrew Latham. He is political science professor at Allister College. Now, Richard, let me come to you first. What exactly are the federal judges saying, the one in California and Maryland? It's basically, it's not can the federal government fire, but how they actually did it. Is that correct?
Well, first, the vast majority of federal workers have job protection, just like I do as an employee of the state of Minnesota, as a university professor, which means they cannot be fired for political reasons. There are statutes protecting the vast majority of federal workers, with the exception of those at the very top who are appointed by the President of the United States. Our civil service laws have been in existence since the 1890s, well over a century. And the President of the United States must comply with the law. And so in each one of these cases, and there are many cases, the judges will look at the law and look at the executive order and determine whether it complies with the law. And then a court order will be issued. The President of the United States must comply with court orders. That is clear. We've had a handful of extremists at the far left in some of our law schools and at the far right say that a president need not comply with a federal court order. That is simply not true. Every president of the United States since Abraham Lincoln has complied with the orders of the United States Supreme Court, the lower federal courts. It's absolutely critical that President Trump comply with the law.
Andrew, do you see a scenario where President Trump does not comply?
I don't see him thumbing his nose at the courts like that, but he will appeal this. I mean, we have at least three levels of federal courts, right? There's the district and the appellate, and then the Supreme Court. And some of these district courts have already changed their mind or been overturned. I mean, we have a system constitutionally in this country in which the executive branch has really significant latitude in terms of interpreting the law and enacting policies. And you marry that with the ethos of this administration, which is borrowed from the tech industry, which is move fast and break everything. And you're going to get a lot of turbulence and turmoil. The question is, ultimately, is the administration operating within the law? In which case, if it is, these are just policy debates. Or is it actually violating the law, in which case this is something of a constitutional crisis? And we're not in a position just at the moment to make that determination because it hasn't gone where it needs to go, which is to the Supreme Court.
Right. Andrew and Richard, do stay with us because we'd like to get your insights on the other big legal development this week. Trump has taken his fight to enforce an end to birthright citizenship to the Supreme Court. He wants the Supreme Court to narrow lower court orders that blocked his move. Now, Trump wants to stop birthright citizenship for any child born in the US to undocumented immigrants and even foreigners here on temporary visas. Richard, the Trump administration's emergency appeals to the Supreme Court is not about the constitutionality per se of the executive order that he has enforced, but what his administration calls in that emergency filing, a modest request to reduce the scope of the lower court injunctions. What does that mean?
What we have here is a federal district court has imposed a nationwide injunction, not just in the district where the court sits, but the entire country. Arguably, this is an expansive use of judicial power that exceeds the power of a federal district judge sitting in one sitting. The problem is that if you don't have a nationwide injunction that is appealed up through the courts of appeals, ultimately to the Supreme Court, what you're going to have is injunctions in cities all over the country from federal judges. And you might have a disagreement among the federal judges with hundreds of cases. And so the nationwide injunction, as much as the Trump administration objects to it, is the best way to get this issue up to the Court of Appeals, to the United States Supreme Court, where I believe the Supreme Court of the United States will conclude that born in the USA means born in the USA. A natural-born citizen is someone who's born here in our country, and we're not going to ask about the immigration status of their parents. And that's been the law for well over a century, and I believe the Supreme Court will adhere to that law. And I should add that some of our best immigrants who have done the most for the United States come from India. And we need more people coming here from India and other countries around the world. And that's the way we're going to truly make America great again.
All right. Andrew, one of the groups that would be affected are Indians here on work permits. But let's say that the Supreme Court agrees. Can't mothers just hop from one state to another to have their babies to get that birthright citizenship?
Well, I will say, preface my comments by saying, look over my shoulder. I was born in England, immigrated to Canada, then immigrated to the United States. So I'm very favorably disposed towards immigrants and immigration. Secondly, though, the 14th Amendment was passed in a very specific historical context. It was meant to ensure that enslaved people and their children, in the aftermath of the Civil War in this country, were considered to be and treated as full citizens, full stop. And that was expanded in 1898 to ensure that every child of a lawful resident of this country, a legal immigrant to this country, was also entitled to that birthright citizenship. But it all turns on this phrase in the 14th Amendment, which was passed after the Civil War, obviously, subject to the jurisdiction thereof. Now, if you are an Indian diplomat working in Washington and you are pulled over for speeding, there's no court, there's no police, you cannot be tried. So that's one way of thinking about not subject to the jurisdiction of. If you're an unlawful migrant to this country and you're pulled over for speeding, you can still get a ticket. So that's the expansive understanding of subject to the jurisdiction thereof. But there's a narrower version which the Trump administration is pushing, which is if you don't have a visa, if you don't have a green card, if you're not a natural-sized citizen and you're not a natural-born citizen, you're not subject to the jurisdiction thereof. And therefore, people who arrive at 8.5 months pregnant, have a baby in the United States, and then try to claim that that baby is automatically, by birthright, an American citizen, that's problematic from that more restrictive understanding of subject to the jurisdiction thereof.
Andrew, Richard, I have to leave it there for now. Thank you very much for your time here on Washington Watch. In other news, an unsigned letter from Tesla warns that Trump's tariffs could expose the EV maker to retaliatory tariffs in foreign markets. It's a sign of the complex relationship shared between the Tesla CEO, Elon Musk, and the US President Donald Trump. So far, though, the bromance has been on high gear, and it was on full display this week in an event Democrats say needs to be investigated for violating federal ethics laws.
Has devoted his energy and his life to doing this, and I think he's been treated very unfairly by a very small group of people. And I just want people to know that you can't be penalized for being a patriot, and he's a great patriot.
It seems Tesla has a brand new ambassador, US President Donald Trump. Trump, whose Drill Baby Drill anthem echoed throughout his election campaign and his presidency, is now in the market for an electric vehicle. Standing in the White House driveway, the US President inspected a showcase of Tesla's cars and selected a brand new shiny red sedan. Sitting in the driver's seat with Elon Musk in the passenger seat, Trump warned that violence against Tesla dealerships will be labeled domestic terrorism. Now, why does this matter? Musk has been facing the brunt of an escalating political blowback for his role as Trump's advisor and his cost-cutting role heading Doge, with Tesla stock taking a hit in the process. Musk's efforts to fire thousands of federal workers and dismantle whole government agencies have sparked Tesla takedown protests outside dealerships in at least 100 cities over the past month, aiming to undermine the Tesla brand. While most demonstrations were peaceful, a few have been destructive, with fires set at Tesla showrooms and charging stations. Despite his supportive comments, President Trump has been skeptical of green cars, from wishing they rot in hell to bashing Biden, saying only left fascists promote EVs, and his views have not changed. Trump's policies so far have been designed to limit electric car sales in the US, revoking Biden-era policies that pushed EV sales. Yet, Trump's unusual show of support for loyalist Musk and his electric automaker Tesla has cemented its position from once the most democratic car in the US into a MAGA emblem. The irony is not lost here. The question remains, how far is President Trump willing to go to save his top loyalist? Disha Bagchi for NDTV World.
And before we go, time for Diaspora Connect. We head to Music City, Nashville, in the U.S. state of Tennessee. Here's what some young American Daisies are doing in the hope of becoming the next Miley Cyrus or Keith Urban.
Nashville is home to some of America's biggest country music and pop superstars. Taylor Swift, Carrie Underwood, Dolly Parton, all of them starting out with a tiny dream in the hope of hitting superstardom.
Now, in another part of Nashville, a bunch of Indian American kids picking a rather unconventional way to hopefully one day make it in the Country and Pop Music Hall of Fame. Right, how many of you want to become famous here in the music industry here in Nashville? Show of hands. Oh, okay, very good. So what are you hoping to do?
I want to be a famous singer here, probably in pop.
Same, except I want to be in country. I want to be good at country. I want it to be like a side hobby.
All right, so why are you all then learning Indian classical, Carnatic classical? How will that help you guys?
So technically music has no language. So by learning these notes, we can it'll help improve our voices to sing other songs.
Learning the talam helps you get in beat. So when you have, they do this, but we do this, so it's so much easier. It's like a bass, like in music.
A base to build on what?
On any music.
Which one's more difficult?
Carnatic, because the rhythm's very different. Like the one we sang today, there's like a lot of rhythms. Well, English was like only like one type of rhythm.
So Carnatic, because like most songs have like it can start really high pitched and then go down to low and like up and down.
When they have a proper bass, they could easily adapt to any kind of music very easily. So Western music is beautiful, but since they have gone to the harder level, they could adapt the Western music just by listening to it.
If there's one thing you wish for any of your kids, what would it be, Bhairavi?
I wish my students to become like Taylor Swift or Ariana Grande, one of the popular singers in the world.
We all know animals have feelings. They depend on kindness, just like you and me. So imagine how they feel when they're beaten, starved, and unloved. Every minute, the RSPCA is called on to save animals in physical agony and mental torment. It's unbearable to see the pain in their eyes. We refuse to give up on them, but to rescue them from a life of fear, we urgently need animal lovers like you to donate today. Please call 0800 121 4260 or text KIND to 84903 to give £2 a month to the RSPCA. Your gift will help fund more life-saving rescues, more emergency treatment, and more gentle rehabilitation. Every month, you'll be helping to keep animals free from pain and sadness, so they can find the comfort and joy they deserve. Right now, across the country, thousands are suffering deliberate harm. But together, we can show animals what kindness feels like. Together, we can rescue them. So please, call 0800 121 4260, text KIND to 84903, or visit our website to start your monthly donation today. Thank you.
Protect what matters to you with Simply Safe Home Security. Get our Which Best Buy rated starter pack from under £200. There's no safe like Simply Safe.
When I woke up, they said, Alyssa, you've got leukemia. We found out that the chemo wasn't working. So at that point, it was like, I'm gonna die. My consultant was looking for these clinical trials, and she found this one at Great Ormond Street. I'm cancer-free now.
Curing Alyssa was a world first, but cancer is still the biggest killer of children in the UK. Will you help us do more?